About an hour north of Marrakesh is one of the most important mines in the world. Here, a chalky white powder is dug up for the extraction of phosphates. It's a critical mineral that the whole world needs, and Morocco has 70% of its global reserves. So what are phosphates and why do they matter?
Because the main objective is to develop more trade and exchange and business opportunities between the Arab world and India. India is a very big partner, reliable partner, also very strong economy. And then the Arab world are growing, there is great necessities, there is lots of very good opportunities for investments. So I think this serves as a platform which will help into making more business opportunities be exploited the way they should.
Imagine waking up one morning and hearing this: India's food supply is collapsing, farmers can't plant, harvests are drying up, and millions face empty shelves, not because of drought, not because of pests, but because of something buried thousands of kilometers away in the deserts of Morocco. It sounds dramatic, but here's the reality. India, home to 1.4 billion people, is completely dependent on a single, overlooked resource to keep its farms alive. That resource is phosphate rock, and Morocco just happens to control more than 70% of the world's reserves. If Morocco turned off the tap tomorrow, India's agricultural machine, the same machine that feeds the second largest population on Earth, would grind to a halt. Crops like wheat, rice, and maize would wither. Food prices would skyrocket, and the world's most populous democracy would be staring at a crisis it could never solve alone. But how did India, a nation famous for its farming culture, become so dependent on a foreign desert for survival? And why does Morocco hold a kind of power that oil-rich countries can only dream of? To answer that, we have to look at the secret story of phosphate, the hidden chemical that feeds the world, and this story is about to get even more interesting. Because India's reliance on Morocco doesn't just affect farmers, it's tied to global rivalries, billion-dollar deals, and a looming question: what happens when one country holds the keys to the future of food? To understand the stakes, we need to know what phosphate really is. Forget about oil, forget about gold. Phosphate is the unsung backbone of modern farming. Without it, plants simply can't grow. Here's why. Every single grain of rice, every stalk of wheat, every ear of corn relies on fertilizer, and one of the three essential ingredients in fertilizer alongside nitrogen and potassium is phosphorus, which comes from phosphate rock. Think of it as plant fuel. Without it, the soil goes barren, and unlike nitrogen, which you can capture from the air, or potassium, which is spread across the globe, phosphate is incredibly rare and geographically concentrated. It only comes from mining. Once you dig it out, use it, and spread it on fields, it doesn't return to the earth in the same way. That means the world is slowly running down a non-renewable resource that every farmer on Earth desperately needs. Now here's the kicker. While most countries have little to no phosphate reserves, Morocco is sitting on a mountain of it, over 50 billion metric tons, making up more than 70% of global reserves. In other words, Morocco is to phosphate what Saudi Arabia is to oil, except even more dominant. And this dominance is why India, despite being one of the world's top food producers, is locked into a dependency it can't escape. Because no phosphate, no fertilizer, no food, and no India as we know it. But India's reliance isn't just about science, it's about history, politics, and billion-dollar deals. And to see how deep this dependency goes, we have to look at the rise of Morocco's phosphate empire and how India got entangled in it. At first glance, Morocco doesn't look like a global heavyweight. It's a North African nation of about 37 million people, smaller in population than just one of India's major states. But beneath its deserts lies something that makes it one of the most strategic countries on Earth: phosphate. Morocco's state-owned giant, OCP Group, controls the world's largest phosphate reserves. Think of OCP as the Saudi Aramco of fertilizers, with mines stretching across the country, from Karibga to the contested territory of Western Sahara. OCP has built a system that dominates global supply chains. In the 20th century, as farming across the world industrialized, phosphate went from being a scientific curiosity to a strategic resource. Suddenly, every government realized whoever controls fertilizer controls food, and whoever controls food controls stability. That's when Morocco's quiet desert deposits transformed into global leverage. While oil-rich nations were getting rich from petroleum, Morocco was quietly building an empire out of fertilizer. Today, OCP produces tens of millions of tons of phosphate-based products every year and ships them to more than 160 countries. And here's the hidden truth. When food prices spike in Delhi or rice harvests stumble in Punjab, part of the story can often be traced back to contracts signed in Rabat, the capital of Morocco. But Morocco doesn't just sell phosphate to anyone, it uses supply agreements strategically, and that's exactly how India became one of its biggest partners. But why India? Why not China or Europe or the US? To answer that, we need to see just how vulnerable India really is without Morocco's help. India might be the land of farmers, but when it comes to fertilizer, the country faces a serious problem. Unlike Morocco, India has very limited phosphate reserves of its own. The deposits that do exist are often low quality or too expensive to extract at scale. This leaves India in a dangerous position. It can produce nitrogen fertilizer at home. It has some potassium imports covered, but phosphorus almost entirely dependent on imports, and Morocco has emerged as India's lifeline. In recent years, Morocco has become India's single largest supplier of phosphate rock, phosphoric acid, and finished fertilizers like DAP and TSPT. The numbers are staggering. In 2022 alone, Morocco's share of India's DAP imports surged from just 2% a few years earlier to more than 25%. Nearly a quarter of India's total rock phosphate and almost half of its phosphoric acid imports come from Morocco. Without those shipments, Indian fertilizer factories would sit idle. Farmers would face shortages, and the ripple effect would hit every Indian household at the dinner table. And this dependency isn't shrinking, it's growing. As India's population expands and demand for food increases, so does its hunger for phosphate. Which means Morocco's grip over India's agricultural system is tightening every year. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because this isn't just about two countries trading goods. It's about billion-dollar deals, political alignments, and long-term strategies that tie India's future to Morocco's deserts. In 2023, India and Morocco signed a series of massive agreements through OCP and Indian fertilizer companies. The deals included supplying 1.7 million tons of phosphate fertilizers, a mix of DAP and TSP customized for India's soil needs. But it doesn't stop at imports. OCP has gone a step further. It's investing in joint ventures with Indian firms, securing long-term supply chains, and even helping India develop customized fertilizers to boost crop yields. One Indian company, Paradeep Phosphates, signed an annual contract to receive over 1 million tons of raw phosphate rock from Morocco. That rock is processed in India into the fertilizers that keep rice paddies green and wheat fields golden. These deals are worth billions of dollars, but they're about more than just money. They're about security. For India, partnering with Morocco ensures its farmers won't suddenly run out of fertilizer. For Morocco, securing India as a buyer means steady revenue and geopolitical influence. But this relationship is about to get tested, because India isn't the only country knocking on Morocco's door, and the competition is fierce. Remember how oil created global rivalries in the 20th century? The same thing is happening with phosphate in the 21st, and Morocco is at the center of it. The US wants access to Moroccan phosphate to secure its food system. Europe is desperate to reduce its reliance on Russian fertilizers. China, already the world's biggest fertilizer producer, has been eyeing Morocco's reserves as insurance for its massive population. This global scramble means Morocco suddenly finds itself courted by multiple powers at once, and India is caught in the middle of this rivalry. If Morocco chooses to prioritize other countries, India could be left scrambling to secure supplies. And there's another complication: politics. Morocco's phosphate industry is deeply tied to Western Sahara, a disputed territory. Some countries, especially in Europe, have boycotted imports from this region, but India has continued buying, quietly choosing food security over politics. This puts India in a sensitive spot. It wants to maintain good relations with Western allies, but it can't afford to jeopardize its fertilizer lifeline, so the question becomes, how long can India rely on Morocco in an increasingly competitive and politicized market? The stakes are only getting higher. By 2050, the world's population is expected to hit nearly 10 billion. Food demand will skyrocket, and phosphate demand will grow right along with it. But here's the dark truth: phosphate is finite. Some scientists warn that the world could face a peak phosphate crisis within decades, where demand outstrips supply. If that happens, the countries with reserves like Morocco will hold unimaginable power. For India, this is a ticking time bomb. It cannot afford to rely forever on a single supplier. That's why it's exploring phosphate deals with countries like Jordan and Saudi Arabia, but none of them can match Morocco's scale. Meanwhile, Morocco is doubling down on its role as the food gatekeeper. OCP is investing billions into expanding capacity, building fertilizer plants abroad, and positioning itself as the indispensable partner for global agriculture. This means the India-Morocco relationship isn't just about today's trade, it's about the future of global food security. If India plays its cards right, this partnership could secure its farms for decades. If not, it risks being trapped in a resource crunch that no amount of money can solve. When most people think of power, they think of oil fields, tech giants, or nuclear weapons. But in the 21st century, one of the greatest forms of power is much simpler: the ability to feed people, and Morocco, with its deserts full of phosphate, holds the keys to that power. India, with its 1.4 billion mouths to feed, knows it better than anyone. This isn't just a story about fertilizer, it's a story about survival, geopolitics, and the hidden resources that shape the world. Because when you strip everything else away, nations rise and fall on whether their people can eat. And right now, India's food future is tied to Morocco's phosphate empire.